All right, so we're going to pick up this time talking about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, this is a really interesting one because this is something that really hasn't gotten a lot of attention into the last, recent years. But it's something that's always been around. You guys might recall that you've heard about shell shock from when you studied the World Wars. What we called shell shock and battle fatigue and those types of things are now what we recognize as PTSD. Now, about 10 to 35% of people who experience trauma not only have burned-in memories, but also 4 weeks to a lifetime of repeated intrusive recall of those memories, nightmares and other re-experiencing, social withdrawal or phobic avoidance, jumpy anxiety, or hypervigilance. So one of the really key things to remember here. Okay, 4 weeks to a lifetime. Now, after a traumatic event, many people have what we call acute stress disorder, which is, immediately following you're stressed, you're anxious, you're having these things. But when it starts to last upwards of 4 weeks and it doesn't get better and if anything, it's escalating, this is when we start to look at PTSD. So something to really remember here is this 4 weeks kind of term. Now, also, when we're talking about repeated intrusive recall of memories, when we say intrusive, and also just this re-experiencing, this tends to be not like, oh, you remember something like, you're thinking about it and then the memories kind of just like fall in line. It's just they appear. They're sudden, they're uncontrollable. Little things, other sensory experiences can set them off, and they're like they're flashbacks, okay? They're literally flashbacks where you're there. And so one of the things we see with people with PTSD, they hear a car backfiring and they fall to the ground and go into battle mode and things like that. So it's a really difficult disorder for people to come to terms with because it is very intrusive and it's very hard to understand what's happening because a lot of people with PTSD say that they feel like they're going crazy. Now, social withdrawal and phobic avoidance is also another key thing there because they kind of start to feel this like what's happening to me, what's going on, I can't control this. They start to withdraw socially because they don't know how to control it and they don't know when another episode's going to come on and when it's going to happen. So it is a disorder that we're studying more and more. The military gets a lot of attention because it is something that we worry about with soldiers because they are, more likely to have traumatic experiences than the general population. But we do know that any traumatic event for anybody of any age can set off PTSD as well. Oh, and sorry, insomnia and sleep problems. I forgot to click through that last one. Now, who gets PTSD? Okay, those with less control of the situation tend to be at a higher risk factor. Those traumatized more frequently. Okay, those with brain differences. We do know that there is a resiliency factor that ties to PTSD. Now, it's not a weakness factor, it's a resiliency factor, and those are two totally different things. Those who have less resiliency and those who get re-traumatized. So these are some of the factors that play a role in why one person would get PTSD and why another person wouldn't. So going back to this idea of resiliency and post-traumatic growth, the resilience recovery after trauma may include some lingering but not overwhelming stress, finding strengths within yourself, finding connections with others, finding hope, seeing the trauma as a change that can be overcome, and seeing yourself as a survivor. So people who kind of are more resilient and who are less likely to get PTSD tend to have these things. And these attitudes and these interactions, so that makes them less susceptible. Now, less susceptible does not mean immune, okay? But people who don't have this kind of resilient mindset also do tend to be a little bit more at risk. Oops. All right, so with PTSD, we're going to spend some time again in class talking about these and looking at some examples and hearing some people talk about what PTSD is and what it isn't. And it's a really fascinating thing because of the new research and all the continued research that's going on, because we really are just at the tip of the iceberg of understanding PTSD and what's happening with it.